what should I do to practice for coding interviews?
Oh, coding interviews. I have a whole bunch of feelings about that, but I'll keep that down. So let's go through it. Practical stuff. So one, LeetCode, I use it a little bit. It's a great resource. So you can actually see example questions. Like, for example, they'll ask you to navigate a binary tree. Very rarely in my work over the last 7 or 8 years, there's not a lot of binary trees that I've had to navigate, but they need you to, for some reason, be able to do that during coding interviews. So a lot of practice questions. Get used to the terminology because they're going to ask you weird things like big O notation, time complexity, all these things that you kind of know as a programmer and you think about, but you never, like I never once on a code review, Michael said, so what is the time complexity on this for loop that you're doing? Like it doesn't, it's not a thing. I mean, you know it, but it's not that important, but they really knock that in there. And then the other thing I would say is watch some videos on YouTube. Like there's people that will literally walk you through this stuff on what you need to do. So what do you
Yeah.
think?
My biggest thing when I was interviewing candidates, I need you to talk out loud. I need you to be able to say say your thoughts back to me before you even start typing, right?
Mhm.
Ask good questions. I'm probably giving you a coding question where I'm expecting you to not know something, right? I probably gave you a question that has ambiguity. I want you to find that ambiguity, right? I want you to talk to me out loud about it because chances are I'm not actually looking to see whether or not you've solved my riddle, right? I'm looking to see whether or not I could work with you. I'm looking to see whether or not we can get on a pair programming session and you won't just clam up and immediately stop talking to me whenever you're like thinking too much, right? So like get used to being able to say what you're going to do it, read it back to me as if like, you didn't just write it out and make sure that you like coded it correctly. Cuz as long as you're like saying what you want to do, even if you don't do it right, if you say like, "Oh, I want to be able to go through every line of this file and print them out individually uh for whatever reason," right? If you say that out loud, but then like you code it a little bit wrong, I'll probably just like nudge you in the right direction of like, well, you said you want to do this and I don't see it here, and I'm going to give you the answer like in Word. So that's my practice talking in the coding is very much like individual, but interviewing and pair programming, you need to be able to say what you're thinking and what you're working on out loud.
And to add on that, I've noticed as the few places I did interview, there were almost two types of questions. So there's a kind where they say, we're going to pull up this program and we're going to sit there and going to watch you type and you're going to talk through everything. And then there's a kind where they say, we've got this system and we want to talk through all the things you're going to do. And for the system one, like there's plenty of good YouTube channels. There's one I'll recommend. I'll put in the description there, which I watched a lot of where they talk about how's Twitter built. And one that's kind of interesting is how to build a parking lot. That's a really interesting one if you've ever seen that. But the thing to think about when you go into those is you're always walking through like how can you build it better each time, because they'll say something like, okay, we started this application and now it's caught on, so what can we do because of users? Always throw a cache in there. That always helps. Just in general, just say you're going to cache
Hash
something.
maps.
Yeah. Oh, hash maps are always another one too. Figure out how to use a hash map.
Everything's hash map. You could solve every problem with a hash map or a heap.
Always. And then the other thing, just like you said, is be able to practice talking while you code. It's a very weird thing to do because when you're doing it by yourself, there's no reason because people would think you're crazy if you're talking to yourself as you're coding. But that's really the whole point of the exercises is they can hear what you're thinking and your problem solving. And the last bit I'll have on it is I interviewed at one place where they had a very simple one, but they wanted just to confirm that you knew how to do the language. It's like when I was in C sharp. And it was something simple where all I had to do was iterate over something and add it together. And I tried to get all fancy and I added all these link statements and they go, well, that works, but is that the best way? And I was overcomplicating it. So always try to figure out the easiest way to do it if you're doing a programming question.
I once passed a programming interview with less, cat, grep, and then less again. Like, I think, like, because it was like, take this file, find the most common word in the file. Oh, right. I did like sort. Sorry, it was cat, sort, unique, and word count. So, like, my whole interview was just piping Linux commands into a thing and being like, there you go.
So what did they
Uh,
think? I'm curious, what did they think about that? Did they like the fact that you quote unquote thought outside the box, or were they like, well, we had a plan for you and we wanted you to write it in a scripting language or something?
they gave me a terminal. They gave me a place where I could write Python, but it
Uh-huh.
also had a terminal. And I said, "Oh, the file's right here." And they're like, "Yeah." And I just did it in the terminal. Um, I'll put it this way: I did that for one interview, and it went great. Another interview, a company asked me to read out, like they gave me the output of like what was it? It's gonna come back to me. HTOP. So
Uh-huh.
they gave me the output of top, and they said, "Oh, we want you to make a function that'll read top and like do this like kind of like weird stuff." And I said like, "Oh, top already does all that. Top sorts it. Top does this. Top does that." And they're like, "Yeah, but you don't have access to top." I'm like, "But I have access to output." And so like I got really belligerent about it, and I was like, this is solved. I don't want to solve it." And they're like, "Yeah, but solve it in Python." I'm like, "I don't want to solve it in Python. It's already solved. Here's your answer." And I gave them the answer of like it was top dash H or something. And they're
Uh-huh.
like, it so it went poorly in one and great in another. So 50-50 shot.
And I'm going to finish with something that we talked about in our last interview. If they ask you, like, say the job is to build an API for something, and they go, okay, what we're going to have for our coding interview is we need you to build this API that does this thing and put together an architecture diagram and come talk to us and present it. I think that is the most ludicrous thing in the world that they would ask you to do the thing for the job, because say there's 10 people applying, you got a 10% chance. They get 10 free contractors essentially to show up, pitch them ideas, and then they get to pick one. They might not even like the best plan. They might just pick someone they like the best and then take the other 9 plans and put it in their little Kanban style thing. So that's my take on that.